Hello. I don't really have a good greeting, so just pretend I said something nice. Today we're going to be talking about TouchDesigner versions, which is particularly relevant since there have been some pretty exciting new releases that have come out recently. And I'm going to tell you why you shouldn't use all that fun new stuff, or at least why you should be intentional about choosing when to use it. The big theme here is going to be compatibility and reliability. Before we get into why it's important to pay attention to versions, let's first talk about when it's okay to mostly ignore them and just always use the latest release. If you're just playing around and making some visuals or something, it might be fine to just do that, especially if you don't really care about going back to your older projects. So if that's you, you might not need to care about versions. But what if you would want to be able to go back to your older projects and have them work reliably? This is when versions become important. Like most software, TouchDesigner is continually evolving. And the exciting parts of that are the new features. Releases might come with new operators or new parameters or, you know, maybe even entire new families of operators, although that one tends to only happen every few decades. But releases are more than just new features. They also contain fixes for bugs that people have reported in the forums, and they might replace existing stuff with a newer, better implementation. Those are generally supposed to behave the same way as far as we users are concerned, but mistakes happen. And subtle changes might not break in obvious use cases, but might mess with some specific little thing that your project happens to rely on. So it's possible that a project that would be fine in one version might break in a later version, and it might break in ways that aren't immediately obvious. Then there's compatibility. TouchDesigner project files are theoretically forwards compatible, and what that means is that you should be able to open a project in a newer version than the version that was used to create that project. And when you do that, the same operator should be there with the same parameters and expressions and all that other stuff. And in many cases, this is true, but not all. Sometimes derivative will rename a parameter or even rename an entire operator. And when they do that, they'll typically add some code that automatically converts a project when it first loads. But if you save it after that, it's saving those new converted names. If you then try to open it with the original version, then that version's not going to know what those things are, because at the time that it was born, those names hadn't come into existence yet, and there isn't currently an effective way to predict those changes or the conditions in the world that led to those changes being made. So to handle that scenario, every TouchDesigner project file contains information about what version was used to create it. And that information is hidden in mysterious binary data in a TOE file. But there are some tools that you can use to look at that information, which I'm going to discuss later. Anytime that TouchDesigner opens a project, it's going to look at what that version in the project is and its own version, and it's going to compare the two. And if the project is from an older version, then it knows how to update the project to match the new naming, or at least it attempts to, though it will often miss things. And the greater the difference between the two versions, the worse that's going to be. So if you're trying to open a project from 2016, good luck. But if it's from a newer version than the version that's trying to open it, it's going to show a warning dialog saying that it might mess things up in the file. And if you remember nothing else from this video, remember this: do not ignore that warning. You need to treat that as TouchDesigner telling you that you need to stop and use the newer version instead. If you ignore it, there might be little broken things scattered throughout your project, and you might not even be able to easily find all of them. So seriously, do not ignore it. If you can't use an old version to open a new project, it means that as soon as you save a project file with a new version, you can't go back. You have now committed to only using that new version from then on. And if there are compatibility issues, you're going to have to track those down and fix them. And the main reason that that matters is licenses. Licenses for TouchDesigner give you access to new versions up to a year after when you first bought the license. After that, you're going to need to buy another year's worth of updates. It's so much better than Adobe and all those subscription services that continually extract money from you month after month. Yay, capitalism. But not everybody can afford updates all the time. And sometimes for long-term projects that were installed somewhere in the physical world, Often, the client paid for a license when that thing was first created, and they're not going to want to have to pay for updates unless there's a really good reason to do so. That means that there are times when using a new version just isn't an option. So changing your projects to depend on a new version can mean that those projects might not be able to run at all in the situations where you need to run them. Given all those issues, here are some rules to follow. So 1, only use the same version of TouchDesigner that you've last used on a project. Or 2, if you do decide to upgrade to a newer version, that should be an intentional decision that you make. And when you make that decision, you need to consider whether you're going to be able to run it in all the places that you need to, considering licenses and that sort of thing, and whether you're okay with having potential issues introduced to a project that you're going to have to go through and just verify that things still work. So what if you need to use one version for one project and another version for another project? This is where parallel installations come in, and this is a little bit different on Windows and Mac OS. In Windows, in the installer, there's an option if there's already a version of TouchDesigner installed where you can choose to either replace it or add a new one next to it. And on Mac OS, because for some reason Apple decided that they don't like installers as a whole concept, you're going to need to rename the touchdesigner.app before copying it into your applications folder. Using these techniques, you can have multiple versions of TouchDesigner installed at the same time. And that's how I once ended up with 16 different versions installed on the same computer, which might sound fun, but it takes up a lot of disk space and it's really confusing. So now I tend to keep a few versions with the latest version and then a couple of the versions from projects that I might need to be working on. And whenever I've run out of disk space, because for some reason I thought that 1 terabyte was enough for a system drive, I'll go through the versions and uninstall the ones that I haven't used in a while. If you need older versions of TouchDesigner, Derivative has a handy archive on their website with years and years of versions that you can download. And if they don't have a specific one that you need, you may be able to ask support and get them to dig that up out of their archive. Okay, but how, you're asking, are you supposed to know which version a project was saved with? Well, there is a command line tool called toexpand.exe that you can use to extract the version number from a file. But nobody wants to do that, or almost nobody wants to do that. Instead, you should use an amazing tool called TD Launcher. It was made by Lucas Morgan, who also created GeoPix. It's available on GitHub, and I'll include a link in the description. Or you can just search for TD Launcher. It's now supported on both Windows and Mac OS. When you open it, it scans your computer for any installed versions and shows you a list of all of them. And then you can pick which one you want to open. You can also use it to open projects, and when you do that, it's going to look at the contents of that project file and figure out which version that project is from, and it's going to select that version out of the list of ones that you have installed. Though you can also tell it to do it in a different version if you want. If you don't have the version that a project came from, it's going to show you a warning, and then you're just going to have to pick a different version to open it in, or, go and download and install that version and then try it again. In both operating systems, you can make this the default program that you use to open TOW files. So I install this on all of my machines, and this is just how I open projects now. So that's about it for versions. The key things to remember are each project is tied to a specific version of TouchDesigner. Always try to use that same version for a project, unless you choose to update and fix any compatibility issues that might come up. And finally, use TD Launcher so that you know which version of TouchDesigner you're using anytime you open it. Anyways, thanks for watching. It seems like these recent videos have really been resonating with people, and I'm excited to do more of them. And I'm always looking for new topics to cover, especially things that aren't covered that often. I love getting comments, so let me know if you've had any version catastrophes, or if you found this useful, or you have any other strategies for working with this kind of stuff. If you want to support me making more of these videos, you might consider subscribing to my Patreon. You'll get early tutorial access and Discord, where I sometimes talk about unreleased stuff that I'm working on, and file downloads and other stuff like that. Thanks for watching, and make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It really does help more people to see these videos, and it does motivate me to keep doing more of them.